In Luke's Gospel, chapter 15, we get the account of the story or the parable. Jesus often teaching in parables. And here we have the parable of the prodigal son. In Luke chapter 15, we get two other parables that take place before the story of the prodigal. We have the parable of the lost sheep, and then the parable of the lost coin. I just want to look at Luke 15 verses 1 and 2 before we pick up at verse 11 with the story of the two sons. In Luke 15 verses 1 and 2, we find this. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So we have two groups of people who are often curious, attracted to Jesus. Some of these people are attracted to Jesus because of the promise of deliverance, the hope of healing, the desire for redemption, which they believe Jesus holds. Throughout the Gospels, we find people coming to Jesus who are destitute, poor, broken, lame, and they come to Jesus seeking restoration, redemption, healing, deliverance in their life. And we also have the Pharisees and the scribes. These are the religious leaders. These are the righteous in their communities, or rather, in their own eyes. We get an account in the Gospels of two men who go up to the temple to pray. And one of them prays that he's thankful he's not like this other sinner, this publican who has come out to pray. He's good, he's kept the commandments, he's a righteous person. And the publican, the sinner who comes up to pray, beats his chest and says, "Father, forgive me. Have mercy on me." And it is the sinner that goes home justified. The interesting thing with both of these groups of people that we find portrayed in the Gospels, both have strayed. Both are far from the heart of God. And Jesus shares in Luke 15 verse 11 and following. Then Jesus said, "There was a man who had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' So the father divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute or wild living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything." So we have a younger son. And in this culture at this time, an inheritance, much the same as today perhaps, inheritance would have been given to the children upon the father's death. And so here we have a son, a younger son, whose share of the inheritance would have been a third, most likely, with 2/3 going to the elder son. And this younger son says, "Give me my share, give me my third of the inheritance which is to come." And interestingly, the father would not have had this money necessarily sitting around to give to the younger son, but it would have been tied up in most likely land and or livestock. And so the father sells off a third of what he has to give the younger son his share, his portion of the inheritance. Odd move by the father. And the father in this story, the father in this account, represents God. If we choose to walk away from God, a God who gives us life, a God who gives us breath, a God from whom we receive our daily sustenance, including every breath that we take. If we choose to walk away from this God still gives life. He still gives breath. He still sustains us. The rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. We still receive from the Lord, even in our disobedience, even in our walking away. And so this Son is provided for. What is owed to him, his share, is given to him by the Father, showing the love and the grace of the Father even in the midst of disobedience. And the disobedience here is severe. Asking for one's inheritance is the same as saying, Father, I wish you were dead. Father, I don't need you, your counsel, your presence in my life. All I want, all I need is what it is that you can give to me. I want your money. I want your provision, but not you, yourself, in my life. And so the father divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathers again all that he has, and he goes off, and he wastes his share of the inheritance. Is gone. That third, which would have been most likely a substantial amount, is gone. It's amazing how quickly the material things can disappear in our lives. They do not last. And even if we hold on to them in this life, we do not carry them into eternity. And the material things which he has had have been squandered, and he spends everything. And at this time a severe famine breaks out in the land, and he begins to be hungry. He begins to be in need and in want. In verse 17, but when he came to himself, or when he came to his senses, when he stopped to think about it, he said, how many of my father's hired men have bread enough to spare, but here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and I will go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me or treat me like one of your hired hands. And most likely the son had no expectation of being restored into the family, probably no expectation of even living within the father's house once again. But he was going to go back. He would live where the hired men live, and he would work for his father, and at least in that regard not be hungry. His father has, even after he has wasted a third of what belonged to his father still has more to give. He has more to spare. And so this son is going to return to his father and ask to be hired on, acknowledging his sin, acknowledging his disobedience, acknowledging he was wrong. I wonder, if he had not become hungry, would he have come back? Is he coming back out of true repentance or out of need and necessity of receiving something from God? Either way, he returns. In verse 20, he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. The father was moved. It's this Greek word, moved with compassion. The father was shaken. His body, his innards, his life was moved upon seeing his younger son return. He was so overjoyed that he was moved deep in his spirit, and he runs. Children run. Women may run. But in this culture, at this time, a man of position, a man like this man, would not run. He would not lift up his clothing and run in public. Maybe not even in private, but definitely not in public. But the father runs, showing his inability to control the emotion which is inside of him, his disregard of social norms and social customs, his disregard for what others think and feel about him. He runs to embrace the son which is returning or has returned home. He puts his arms around him and he kisses him. Then the son begins his speech. Father, I have sinned against heaven, and before you I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But he does not get to the words, make me a hired servant. Something is happening here in this moment between the interaction of the father and the son, the compassion expressed, the disregard for public image is cast aside. And the father embraces the son, and in that moment, the son perhaps has a realization he is not going to be a servant or a slave or a hired man, for the father's love is too great. No matter how far we've wandered, no matter how far we've gone, that far country, no matter how deep into the darkness of our own will and choice we have fallen, the father's love has not ceased. The Father's love has not diminished. God's care has not gone away. No matter how much of our inheritance, no matter how many of the days of life that God has given us, how many of the breaths that God has provided for us that we have wasted in disobedience to Him, no matter how much, He's waiting for us. He longs for us. He loves us. And he is waiting for our return. The son begins and again shares these two elements of his speech. I have sinned against heaven, and before you I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, quickly bring out a robe, the best one. The best robe in the house most likely would have been the father's robe. The father clothes the son. The father clothes the son with the best robe in the house. Put a ring on his fingers and sandals on his feet, symbols of not being a servant or a slave, but being one who is a child of the master, the Lord of the house. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. To kill the fatted calf would only be done on very special occasions or for very special people. The son is an honored guest in the house of the Father. And the celebrations begin. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now the elder son, verse 25, was in the field. The elder son was in the field doing what the elder son has always done, worked tirelessly for the father, done everything in his capacity to do everything which the father wanted done and more. He was obedient. And when the elder son came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the slaves, one of the hired men, and asked, what's going on? And the slave replied in verse 27, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound. Then he became angry, and he refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you. It's interesting, the younger son, in his disobedience, comes back and figures the only place for him is to be a slave in the father's house, for he is not worthy. The older son deems himself to be worthy of the position of son and of eldest son at that. For he has served the Father righteously, obediently, tirelessly. He has served the Father as a slave in order to win over the Father's approval, in order to win over due from the Father. Much as the younger son was not interested in the Father's presence, was not interested in relationship with the Father, was not interested in being with the Father, so the younger son, or the older son, also, in all of his obedience, in all of his service, in all of his being like a slave to the Father, as the elder son, has done this all in an act and a means of not having the Father's presence, but having the Father owe him, of earning something from the Father. The elder son also does not appear to be interested in the Father himself, but in what the Father can provide. If I serve my Father this way, if I give to my Father this way, if I am obedient and do everything my Father wants and beyond, my Father will owe me. Give me the fatted calf. You owe it to me. I deserve it. I've earned it. All these years, I have been working like a slave for you. I have never disobeyed your command, and you have never given me even a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, and hear the sarcasm in this statement, this son of yours, whom you should not even regard as a son because of his disobedient living. Recall again, if you will, who was gathered at table with Jesus in verses 1 and 2. The tax collectors and sinners. The tax collectors are the elder son. The sinners are the younger son, as portrayed in this story. And the tax collectors and sinners are the younger son, and the Pharisees and the scribes are the elder son in this story. And the Pharisees and the scribes would consider the tax collectors and the sinners as the younger sons, as the ones who do not deserve to be called sons or daughters of God, do not deserve to be welcomed in to the fellowship of God. And here the elder son is speaking as the Pharisees would, is speaking the heart of the Pharisees towards the tax collectors and the sinners. When this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. He has wasted the breath that you have given him. Then the father said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But the elder son has not wanted all the father had to give. He also has just wanted the material things that the Father has to offer. You have not given me a goat. You have not killed for me the fatted calf. You have not given me any of my inheritance at this point. You have not provided for me that I might enjoy life. You have not given. You have not provided. Neither one, the elder nor the younger son, have wanted the heart of the Father. They've only wanted what the Father could give them apart from his presence and his love. Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. The elder son would not go in and celebrate, and the story is left there. We have no indication that the elder son went in. Why? Because the Father has invited in the tax collector and the sinner. Because the Father has invited one in who is not worthy, who is not right, who does not deserve the love of the Father. How difficult it is for us who are righteous, for us who have lived our lives pleasing God for his benefit and gain in our lives, for what he can do for us, for what we think we are earning from him. How difficult it is when we see him give to those who have not worked as hard as we have. But this is not the economy of with the kingdom of God. God invites each and all to come in. So whether you have run in disobedience from the Lord and identify with the tax collectors and the sinners around the table, the worst of the worst, come home. Or whether you're the religious who have lived your life for God in order to earn from Him what you hope He would give to you, what it is you believe you deserve from God, but are angry at the lavishness of God's love. Lay down your pride. Lay down your righteousness, your self-righteousness, and come in fellowship with God and receive from Him ultimately what it is, the best gift that it is that He has for you. His love, compassion, His embrace.